So for me it's a powerful story, and partly because some accident of karma, my Hebrew name is Jonah, so I looked into it, and of course I was really drawn into the story, and it a little bit is a journey of my life, and maybe many of you as well. So it's set in the time of the empire of Assyria, Ashur, around 8th century BC. And you'll know as a prophet, Navi. And my understanding of the place of the Navi in early life of the Israelites is, you could call it channeling. Kind of someone who is not an awakened person necessarily, but certainly has a kind of direct line to above, a kind of direct telephone line, and can kind of intuit things, and also has a very, very strong ethical sensitivity and can really see the way things are going. And not so different from many of us that can look in the future and say, well, just hold on, where are we going? And he was able also, all the prophets were able to offer truth to power. To the people in the Kohanim and others in power, they weren't afraid. They were able to offer the truth, sometimes uncomfortable truth. But the Nevi'im are not necessarily great tzaddikim. They're not necessarily at that level. And it's the case of Jonah. He was the son of Jonah ben Amittai, meaning, in a way, looking for truth, aligning for truth, going towards truth. So, he received a message, intuition, warning, and the message said, go to Nineveh, the capital of the capital city of Assyrians, and was told, you have to go there and get them to wake up to the damage that they're doing and to their moral collapse. And it's a kind of ridiculous mission. Crazy mission. Shirley, go to New York and sort them out. Huh? What? Me? It's like that. The head of the Assyrian Empire, huge empire, but very cruel, very, very violent, and quite understandably, he ran away. He couldn't ignore it because he was a prophet. He couldn't say, oh, it's just a bad dream, this message from God. I'll forget it. Because he's a prophet, it disturbed him, it awakened something in him, he had to deal with it. But his response was fear. I can't do that. I am not good enough. And it's important part of the story because we have that all the time. We have that same message. It's good direction for me to go there, but I can't do that. It's too difficult. It's too many problems. It's too big. I'm not the right person. I'm not good enough for that. self-image. So he, in a way, exactly like us. When we have a challenge, we have a journey, inner journey, outer journey, journey in our life, change careers, whatever it is that we feel we want to make a change. And our first reaction is, oh, I can't, it's too much, which is fear. The fear was very strong with Jonah. He went and caught a boat from Yaffo to Tarshish, and which is in Spain. And this part of the story is interesting because it's always downhill. He went down to Yaffo. He went downhill. He went down into the boat. He caught the boat there. He went down into his cabin in the boat, to his little room. And he sort of went downhill. And he kept going downhill. It was as if he was really depressed. And the storm came, which was really a kind of the storm of life. The karma brewed up a big storm. And the sailors were very alarmed. They were threatened in the ship. And they had some sort of intuition that maybe it was something to do with him. So they went to him and talked to him, and Jonah was asleep, which I guess he just took Valium or whatever. He just couldn't cope. Depressed. You can change the word to depressed. There was a huge storm and he was fasting. Doesn't make sense. But deep depression makes sense. There was the storm of life and he just shut down. Can't cope. Shut down. And wanted to die. And the sailors came and said, can you help? And he said, no, it's my fault. I want to die from you over and you'll be all right. Actually, it's quite a prophecy also. He had insight. They said, no, they were good people. We don't want to do such a thing. But he said, that's the only way you can save the ship. So they threw him overboard. And he didn't die. And he was swallowed by the interesting word in the Tanakh. It's not Leviathan, but daga, a female fish. A fish. Which is interesting because fish is got a lot of symbolic language in old tradition. And female fish. Fish is many in the language Aramaic. Fish is a very powerful word. I don't remember what it is, but it has echoes of. In a way, he was swallowed by mother, by female, by something elemental, primal. It's a symbol of our deep sources, our deep primal sources, our deep under the ground, under the waters, what's our archetypes, our somewhere in us that's dark and deep. I remember for a while I was having dreams nearly every night where, it was years ago, where I was standing next to a kind of sea or a lake, which was black water, and there were small waves, and I was watching the black water, and I realized that the whole black water was one giant fish. It was like a whale Leviathan. I was seeing the back of it, that's why it was black. I was watching the back of the Leviathan. Nothing more happened in the dream. In my case, didn't swallow me up. But I kind of understood how big the vastness of this dark, primal unconsciousness that we have. It's huge, it's vast. And it swallowed him. And he went down into this belly of the fish, dark place. He died in a way. He died. And the language of reaching the bottom of the sea, bottom of everything, bottom of himself, nowhere else to go. Final place, if you like. And in the bottom of the sea, in the belly of the whale, he cried, he prayed, he spoke poems or images which were all very primal. Sea, earth, being closed in, being locked in. And it really feels like a kind of shamanistic process of the conscious, ordinary world that doesn't make sense anymore, that doesn't work anymore. It's unfixable. And the only place to go is that place of the primal zero in us. And I think it's an important message for all of us. Sometimes we want to fix something, sometimes we want to find a new direction in life, sometimes we get stuck, we don't know how to do it, and we want to kind of fix it and get it better and choose the better. And this story, and this aspect of the story says we need to go into the zero place in us, the deepest place of zero, kind of ground zero, to use a 9/11 image. And from there to die to who we were, and from there we can find a new rebirth in our new role in life or in our new direction. But we can't just fix things and get things go there. We need to go through as T.S. Eliot says, you need to go to who you are through the way of who you are not. So it's a passageway, it's like going back to the womb again, to return to the Rechen. It's going back to zero, back to death in a way, and then rebirth. And the fish is himself. The fish is part of him. And then he's thrown out on the other side of the sea, and he's found his purpose. He got thrown out with the energy and the capacity to do the impossible. And he went there, to Nineveh. And he changed them, amazingly. And Nineveh listened. And they fasted, and they repented, and all the animals, the people, everyone kind of went into a kind of shutdown of repentance, of change. And he managed to do that. But the story doesn't end there. he went off outside the city to a hill and watched what was going to happen. He'd done his thing, he made his message, he passed his message, and he went up to the hill. And he saw that the city was saved. And he complained. He was upset. And actually used the language that he wanted to die again. How many times can you go through that? I want to die, I want to die. But he went through it, I think, 3 times. And it's clear he wanted the city to be destroyed. He couldn't see that it could just be fixed. And repent and change. He couldn't face that. He wanted to see, he was still in a model which is a very human model of crime and punishment, of Onish. Sachar v'Onish. And he was still in that. It's very human, we talked about it in our group today. To have that view of reality should be right. But no, there are other laws involved, bigger than him and bigger than being an ordinary human being, saying that, you know, the Assyrian Empire is so cruel and they killed so many people and they destroyed so much and they did such damage also in this part of the world, taking off everybody as slaves or whatever, they're killing lots of people. So he needed that. He needed another message. And what happened is God made a plant to grow, to give him shade. He was in the burning sun and suffering from the sun. God made a plant to grow, a kikayon, and he was relieved. And then it died from some, whatever, a worm. And he, again, I want to die, I want to die, I can't, the sun's burning me up, and so on. And basically the message from God here was, who are you to demand that the city's being destroyed? Do you really want you, to satisfy you, you want hundreds of thousands of people, animals, children, women, to be destroyed? Where's your compassion? And you think you can decide these things? And with that it's left, the story. That's the end of the story. There isn't an answer, in the sense that it's a nice, happy ending. As usually there are in stories, but it was left as a question. Basically the question, who do you think you are to demand Sachar v'Onish? Just like we were talking about the book of Job, Eov, also he asked for something to understand Sachar v'Onish. And he didn't get an answer of that kind, so he got an answer from another place altogether. And I see the story as a very powerful story if we look into it, about our journey, our own journey. Because even here in this retreat, we're going through struggle, we're going through hours of meeting ourselves, not so easy. Things are coming up, not so easy. We are, in a way, hungry for transformation or freedom. And we get stuck. And there's something very deep about our existential fears that seem to hold us back. I can't fly out of myself. I can't be somebody else. I can't go to a place of liberation by, it doesn't seem to work. I sit hours and I'm not a Buddha yet. It feels like that, and we can, if you look deep enough, we will see our existential fears that are holding us back. Our fears of what I don't want to lose myself. I'm afraid, in a way, of being lost, or in the unknown, or beyond. So something very, very deep is holding us back to where we are as people and what we used to be, our story, our history. And we go through the same story. We escape to Tarshiha. We go off. Easier just to go to the telephone, easier to go to comfortable life, easier to just, I'll do it tomorrow or next week or next year, or and it's all the time. We're in that place all the time, not beyond that. It's just easier to, okay, but just open my telephone right now. I won't go into any radical spiritual journey right now. And we go to where it's easier. This is all of us. Me and you, all of us, we have that tendency. It's not just Jonah, all of us, and it's okay. It's not that we should blame ourselves. We should see that as a human situation from the beginning of time, including the Buddha, of course. But the story gives us a hint of where we need to go for that. So we do pay a price for saying, oh, later, oh, I don't really want to meet the full existential reality. And very often karma catches us like the storm. We'll find ourselves struggling, we'll find ourselves depressed, or find ourselves impossible. And then we go on a retreat, a monastery, or this or that. We go on a journey. When we can't, we find ourselves in the storm of life. Some karma catches us, and that really pushes us, just like Jonah. And this is human situation. And in some way or other, at that point, we can't run away anymore. And we stop. And in a way, it's this retreat. What is happening in a retreat? What is happening when we sit for half an hour meditation? We don't escape. We don't run to telephones, that diversions, covering anything. We just stop. And it's a little bit diving into the ocean. It's a little bit diving into the belly of the fish. Whatever comes there is coming, whatever will be there. But I'm stopping right now. I'm not going to play the game anymore. The game of being a kind of, whatever game it is, ordinary person in my usual life. I'm stopping. And it may not be so easy. But there's our resource. At that place, a place of zero, we discover our power. And it's an interesting place, because at that place, in a way, karma stops. Fate stops. The whole Jonah is really about fate, Goral. And that's why it's important today, in Yom Kippur. But fate stops there. We go down to this zero place, and in a way, when we just meditate and go to our simple, basic elements, unconscious or subconscious or ground, breathing, being, hearing, thoughts come and go, but we're in a place of ground. And in that place karma stops, in the sense that we're not making more of it. We're not creating more of the issue. If we have a thought and then we go and do it, then we have more of it. But here, if we have a thought and it passes by, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't work. It doesn't make results. So it's as if... And if we stop in this place of stopping, we can begin again. We can be reborn. We can remake the world. We can remake ourselves from that place, of that zero place. We're not in the track of habit anymore. We broke that. And that's really important. It's one of the most important things about meditation, is sitting quietly. It's not the only thing to break. There are other ways too, but it's really a very helpful, just this sense of stopping and going to basic place, where we can, in a sense, from there we are reborn each time a little bit different, a little bit freer. It's the power of emptiness, to use more Buddhist language. Touch emptiness. And we can find that it's not we're not helpless then. Emptiness doesn't make us like a kind of jellyfish, a medusa. Emptiness opens space, opens possibilities, opens freedom. And then we can act just like Jonah. So I think we can look at this story in many timelines. It's the story of a process of Jonah in a timeline of going to the ship but we can look at it also in our own life as our life. We can look at it as a journey that we go through, going to whatever, a journey of 3 months where we go into some passageway and we, almost like shamanistic, we die somewhere to our ordinary life in order to be reborn. It can be a journey of half an hour. Can be 1 minute. Just zip, we're in zero place and we start again. We can do it in a moment. If you think of a moment of reactivity, when someone makes us angry, we have a power to take a breath, just to stop before we react automatically. Stop, die a bit, instead of the retzef, the chain of reactions, we just stop, zero place, and we can find a new way of relating to the situation. But the stop is the sort of place where it works. So we can see many ways in which this image works for us in different situations. The other thing that's interesting for us is that the fears of Jonah were the agent of change. If he hadn't had those fears and hadn't met those fears in some way, in a very radical way, I mean, he kind of basically said, I die. But the fears were the reason that allowed him to change. If he hadn't met those fears, he would never have gone on that unbelievable journey, radical journey. And it tells us that it's okay to meet our humanness on the journey, to meet our fears. On the contrary, we need to meet our fears. We need to meet our voices that we don't like. We need to meet those places, oh, no, I cannot, or I'm not good enough, or it's not possible, or whatever. We need to meet them. And that's important that we meet them. It's important that we touch them. Allow them. Enjoy them, almost. And it's partly because where we meet those places, that's the beginning, that's where the light comes in. That's where there's a truth in them that we can't do without that truth. We can't do a short circuit, a kind of, how you say, shortcut, and just jump straight. So I think in the story it's really, he had to meet those fears, add us off right to the end. Okay, we maybe don't want to do that. Maybe it's too radical. We don't want to be Jonah and be ready to jump in deep water so much. But it's worth knowing that I think it's classically in the Dharma language you meet nirvana through samsara. You meet the unconditioned through the conditioned. You go through this life of conditioned life in order to meet the unconditioned. A little bit like the other day I was talking about to meet the house builder in order to see that the house can be undone. You need to meet that stuff. So all of you here are meeting plenty of stuff, hour after hour. It's fine. Meet the stuff, but die a bit to it. So the book tells us some, also the story tells us gives us some real sort of guidance on some of the qualities that we need for this journey. The first quality I think that I want to sort of summarize is the quality of wisdom. Rather than thinking our way to transformation, thinking our way to change ourselves, thinking if I sit and work it out, then I can go that direction, this direction, this direction, this direction. If I really work at it in my mind, I can get there. But the story says the wisdom does the job rather than the usual mind. And the wisdom goes to places which are not in thought. They're in the dark places of the unconscious, they're in the dark places of beyond, they're in the belly of the whale. But it's a female. Not the whale, a big fish, she's a female. In the Kabbalistic tradition, the kind of wisdom that we're talking about in practice, in Dharma practice, from the Kabbalah point of view, is Bina. It's not Chokhmah, it's Bina. It's female, it's more deep, it's more a sort of belly wisdom, or a womb wisdom. It's wisdom of the cells, as well as wisdom of the unconscious, and less knowledge, and it's wisdom of seeing the way the leaves are shaking in the tree and the breath is coming and going. That's not a wisdom of thought. It's much more female, allowing, receiving, feeling, sensing, bigger consciousness. In the Pali language, it's called Yoniso Manasikara, which is female all the way. That's the insight through meditation, is given a very female description or language. Another insight from the story is surrender. I like the word in the story that he was swallowed. He was swallowed. We can be swallowed. It's like we give up, we let go. He wasn't in charge of the process. He was swallowed by the big fish. And we can be swallowed. And we should let ourselves be swallowed. We go on a retreat, we go on a spiritual journey. Let ourselves be swallowed by it. Give up. Let it take us. And there's something there that's also an important message. I've had in my own life, my own practice, loads of experiences of this kind where I've been sitting in caves in Arunchala in India for days and days and weeks, kind of, and then again needing struggling and resistance, and then surrender, and then again struggling and then surrender. It's kind of the humanness of resistance, which is fear, and then surrender. Let it swallow me. And another kind of final area that I want to mention here that we can pick up from the story is a whole world of compassion and kindness. Because it's there as an undercurrent in the story. The sailors in the ship, their kindness. They did everything they could before throwing Jonah over the side. The kindness in relation to Nineveh, that the people who did so much damage at that time, but were forgiven by God, essentially. They were forgiven. There was forgiveness there. The understanding of Jonah that he couldn't decide. It wasn't up to him to decide punishment for the people. There's something bigger there. There's some big rules there that are beyond us. And kindness is, in a way, a ground. It's a ground for all our practice. It's a ground for every time we sit here and we struggle. Kindness is a default. Compassion is default, is a ground. And in a way, what the story is saying is compassion comes from God. Jonah didn't have compassion. He wanted the city of Nineveh to be destroyed and the people to be killed. But compassion came from God, and forgiveness came from God. And the way you can interpret that, okay, it's theistic language, it's God language, but I think it's fair enough to see where there is God language in a theistic model of reality, which is the Bible. The God is here. The God is Godness, our Buddha nature, our deepest, sacred, unlimited place in us. And it's good to know that that's the place. Forgiveness is not technical. Forgiveness is not just on the level of the person, the me. It's on the God level. And same with compassion. Okay, in Tibetan Mahayana language of compassion is, we'll say the same thing but in a very different language. We'll say, the same thing about compassion is sacred, is fundamental, is ultimate. It's what an enlightened consciousness does in the world. So, a final word about karma here, that many stories also in the Buddhist tradition of this kind, and we mentioned in our group the story of Eov, Job, that karma or fate, we can't understand it, we can't control it. He tried to control it. He tried to say, I want the people to be killed in Nineveh, but karma is too big for us to understand or to control. It's not in our hands. We have some influence in the world, but things, forgiveness is happening anyway, all the time, beyond us. And it's kind of giving hope that we're not controlled, we're not under, it's not like a machine controlling us, goral. And we have to be careful about that, because we can also easily get into mindset which is really limited about goral and about karma. That's why I'm not too happy with Gemar Chatima Tova, because it feels like technical process. You get a stamp or you don't. But things are not like that. Karma is not like that. Goral is not. It's flexible. It's fluid. It's not in our hands. It's beyond us completely. I remember, oh my God, must have been 40 years ago, when one day there was a big storm in the British Parliament, because one of the MPs there, the Tsar of the cabinet of sports and culture, he was talking about disabled people who were in wheelchairs. And there was a discussion in the British Parliament about that, and he said, oh well, disabled people obviously disabled because they've done something in a previous life that made them disabled in this life. He picked it up from somewhere, probably some Tibetan teaching, and then said it in the British Parliament. And there was a storm, and I wrote a letter which was passed around, which became in the newspapers and so on, saying, this is a total misunderstanding. I think he quoted Eastern teaching. This is a total misunderstanding of the Eastern teaching. The Eastern teaching doesn't say that. It's a misunderstanding. Simplification. That if you are like this, the next life you'll be born like that. It's childish. And the Buddha never went there, anywhere near that. He said it's far too big, karma, to be in our hands to understand and can have these simple rules. And the same with Eov and the same with Jonah here. And it's quite helpful and hopeful to us that we can create our karma. We create change. We can create movement. We can start again. We can do the impossible, where the rules seem to be against us and everything against us, and we can break through. And we can be forgiven. And we can forgive. And there's something very hopeful about that, and it's flexible, it's workable. But sometimes we need to go through the belly of the whale to have the power to do that. Thank you.